Alright guys and gals, today I thought we'd do something kind of fun and different, and we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 most valuable video games in my collection. Now before we get into this, I do want to mention a couple things. I really don't seek out games just because they're rare or valuable or some kind of status symbol. In fact, a lot of times I avoid those kind of games. I'm the guy like searching through the bargain bins trying to find the good deals. I would say the average cost of each game back here is probably like less than 10 bucks if I had to say. We're just seeing what the extreme end of my collection looks like. Also, to figure out these numbers, it was a little tricky. I did use price charting in most cases where I could, and in the few cases where I couldn't either trust price charting or there wasn't enough data, I did try to pull from eBay, mostly completed sold listings. For games I really couldn't pin down a price, we'll have a few at the end, kind of honorable mentions where I just couldn't quite staple the price down, so I put those separately. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into my top 10 most valuable games in the collection, see what is in store. Alright, and kicking us off at the number 10 spot, this game comes in at $82 flat according to price charting, and that is Poppin' Tanks on the import PlayStation 1 here. This game is a car combat game, very much in the same vein of, say, a Twisted Metal or a Vigilante 8, and honestly, in some ways, I would say it does better than those, and that's coming from a pretty big Twisted Metal fan, but I honestly think this game is head and shoulders above the rest, especially on the PS1. The reason for that is because you control these tanks in this game. The lovely thing about the tanks is that the shoulder buttons allow you to swivel the tank head left and right independently of the actual tank body, which means the maneuverability is so much greater. Being able to shoot one direction and steer in another is a huge boon to this genre, and I wish more games of this era allowed for that because it makes the playability just butter smooth. So I highly recommend this game. Unfortunately, I do think this is one that the word has gone around a little bit, at least in the import market, and you know, maybe import retro circles, because I bought this on Suragaya a little while back for about $45. So yeah, this one's already, you know, a little more expensive than your average import. Definitely worth the price of admission though, in my opinion. I've replayed this game more than a few times at this point. This is a game where I did try it before I bought it. I just loved it enough I had to have in the collection. Coming in at number 9, we have a Sega CD game, and that is Panic. This game, according to price charting, goes for $83.76. I did not pay nearly that much for this game. This is a game that I think I ended up picking up at a convention, and I probably paid half of what this game is worth. I can't imagine I paid more than $40 for this, because this was kind of a take a chance kind of a buy. I wasn't sure if I was going to be into it. I will say, after having streamed it, it isn't exactly my cup of tea. This is essentially a FMV fest where you are thrown into these environments. You can click around. There's buttons usually in a lot of these rooms, and somehow you're supposed to make your way to the end and finish the game, but I have certainly never even gotten anywhere close. I feel like in a lot of ways there's really no rhyme or reason to which buttons, which things you're supposed to interact with. Honestly, this is one of those games where I've heard from a couple others that have finished it that the best way to get through it is to have some sort of guide or map up, which to me personally takes a lot of the fun out of it. This is one that, yeah, unfortunately it didn't gel with me, but it is quite a unique game. It is very interesting. I think the cover art on this is really fantastic and great. While it's not one that I throw on very often, it is a cool one to have, and it's one of those games that has gone up since I bought it, which is always a nice little surprise. The number 8 spot is going to Saturday Night Slam Masters on the Sega Genesis. This is one that was a little harder to pin down because unfortunately my copy is missing the manual. Price charting tends to only have prices for cart only and then up to CIB, and they don't really have like a box in-game price. So in this case, I did have to look on eBay, and it seems like comparable condition copies missing the manual are going for about $89.99. So that's the figure we're putting on this one. I do have a double jump sticker that says $79.99. I did actually manage to trade for this game, which it was really the only way I was going to be able to justify getting a game like this, but I'm glad I have it. This is by Capcom, the wrestling game, but it honestly kind of plays more like their beat 'em ups, which I personally love Capcom's beat 'em ups, so that is a good thing to me. You know, it's not too involved in an experience, pretty short, but I have fun with it, and I figured, you know, why not have in the collection? The opportunity was there, so I grabbed it. There you go, Saturday Night Slam Masters, $89.99. And number 7 here is a bit of a doozy, and that is Cyberdillo on 3DO. Now, according to price charting, the complete price was $90.87. I assume that's pretty accurate. I couldn't quite verify that looking at eBay solds, but I'm gonna take price charting's word on that because 90 does seem about right for, you know, a cardboard box 3DO game in this kind of shape. Cyberdillo, what can I say about this game? This game is an absolute mess. It is probably one of the worst FPSs ever conceived by mankind and released to the public. It is visually a mess. Gameplay wise, it's atrocious. The sound is disturbing. It's just not a very good time, unfortunately. This is kind of one of those examples of why people tend to hate on the 3DO. They assume it's just full of games like this, and while there are a lot of shovelware titles, there are some really great games too, some of which we'll get later in the video here. Number 6 is a bit of a notorious one on the Sega Genesis, and that is Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. This one comes in at about $103 according to a comparable eBay sold listing. This was a game that came out in 1990, obviously to coincide with the Michael Jackson's Moonwalker film. Michael Jackson was apparently pretty involved and, you know, had a history with Sega, weirdly enough. He dug his Sega Genesis. This was one of the products of that, and I will say, while the visuals are awesome and of course the music is outstanding, I can see why Sega pushed this, but honestly the gameplay I find to be very pedestrian and pretty mediocre. It's just like there's not a lot to it. You're rescuing these children from basically impending doom. Honestly, in terms of the gameplay, it's a lot of it's just like walking around. It has some beat 'em up elements which really feel kind of tacked on and not very well implemented. So gameplay wise, I feel like this one is a bit of a dud. Again, visually, soundtrack, I mean, those are the reasons you play this game, and that's probably why this still commands money, because I personally don't think it's really because of the gameplay. All right, we're into the top 5, and the number 5 spot, coming in at $136.30, is Dragon's Lair Trilogy on the Switch. Now, you might be wondering why that price is so high. Weirdly enough, CIB copies go for just under 100 still. This is the sealed price because I do have a shrink-wrapped copy still. Limited run, did this release, and I happened to pick it up, I think for like 50 or 60. Can't imagine having paid more than 60 for this. I definitely has accrued some value since I picked it up. Obviously, I don't treat my games as an investment, so I probably will open this up at some point. One of the reasons I've held off is just because, you know, as much as I like Dragon's Lair, I don't love playing it. It's one of those things where I kind of like watching it more than I do actually playing it. Also, there are so many other ways to play the game. If I want to boot up like the 3DO version or the Sega CD version or whatever, I've got a copy, so can't feel too bad at that point. Maybe one of these days when I feel like playing it on the Switch, I'll crack it open and it'll lose some of its value. But again, I'm not worried about that. And it would still be worth $100 if the market holds. So crazy that this one is worth that much. All right, and coming in at number 4 is a game I bought actually on launch when it came out on the Wii U. Yes, I owned a Wii U back when it was relevant. And that is the Super Smash Bros. For Wii U controller and adapter bundle. It came with the Smash themed GameCube controller and the Wii U USB to GameCube adapter. This, I believe, retailed for $100 when it came out, and now it is worth $136.54, which is kind of cool to know. You know, it's gone up a little bit since all those years ago that I bought it. I think this one is collectible because, right, you get the controller adapter, which there's some third-party ones floating around. I don't know if Nintendo has actually come out and released the adapter separately. I assume at this point they have. Maybe this is still sought after if that's not the case. And, you know, the custom controller with the Smash emblem is pretty sick as well. This was a fun version of Smash Bros. I mean, it's kind of been supplanted by Smash Ultimate, obviously, but I played a ton of this back in the day. Between this and Mario Kart 8, I was having a great time on the Wii U. This and that were really the two big titles, and I honestly don't regret owning this version. It's cool to know it's gone up since I bought it. Number 3, coming in at $149.48, is the Fallout 3 Collector's Edition. Now, specifically, this is the Games for Windows PC release. This copy is actually sealed. I love this game so much that I actually do have an open copy. I just managed to get this game sealed. I think I was just browsing eBay, found an auction for this, and I paid less than $60 for this. So this is almost tripled in value since I purchased it. Fallout 3, just one of those games that hit me at the right time, came out in 2008. I was just the perfect age to absolutely just get enthralled by this game. I loved the setting, the post-apocalyptic wasteland. The gameplay loop was incredibly fun to me as a young teenager, and shooting body parts, and, you know, it's just the gruesomeness of this, the dark humor, the writing, of course, the locales featured in this. I mean, places like Megaton and Tenpenny Tower. I mean, there are locations, there are characters, there are dialogue lines. I mean, just so much of this game is just ingrained in my memory. Again, it was just, you know, playing a game like this during your formative years makes a huge impact on you. Love this franchise. This was my introduction to Bethesda, and because of that, I've got 2 Fallout 3 lunch boxes, one of them being sealed, and it's cool to know that this has gone up since I bought it. And I said there'd be some more 3DO on this list, and number 2 is a 3DO game. We got Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, probably the best version of the game released on home consoles at the time. The reason it's important to note that this is a 3DO game is because this is one of those cardboard long box 3DO games. So this box you're seeing here, this outer box, is all cardboard. The reason that that's an issue when it comes to, say, price charting is you can't trust it, because price charting has this at like $88. The problem is there is a jewel case inside here. People will see the jewel case, they'll see it has the manual inside. It has, I think it even has artwork on the back, and you have the disc. And so people will assume that the game's complete and they'll list it as such. And price charting has no way to filter out those listings when it comes to like a proper actual CIB price, right? To me, CIB for this is the full long box experience. Really, this game is closer, I would say, to $160. That is what eBay sold listings of games in comparable condition. By the way, this long box is like near mint. It's immaculate. It's very rare to find 3DO long boxes in shape this good. I would personally put at around 160 at this point, seeing what eBay has to offer. I paid about 120 for this. Not quite what it's going for now. I feel pretty lucky about that, because this is just a lovely copy of this game. I mean, what needs to be said about Street Fighter 2 that hasn't been said? This is a great version. It's fan-freaking-tastic. Probably one of the best 2D fighting games ever to have graced the industry, and still holds up after all these years. Obviously, there's better ways to play the game at this point. I'm weird. I like the 3DO. I still throw this on, even though there probably are other options out there. I just get a kick out of playing it on 3DO. When people say the 3DO is full of junk, usually I throw this on and they're like, oh, it's got Street Fighter? I'm like, hell yeah, it does. So, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, $160. All right, and the top dog, number 1 most valuable game of my collection. This is a game I have featured before, so might not be too surprising to everybody, but we do have the Terminator on Sega CD. And this game, according to price charting in CIB decent condition, goes for about $180. Yeah, that's quite a bit of money for one game. Luckily, I certainly did not pay anywhere near that, as I've mentioned previously. I got this in a lot, probably like 15 years ago, with a whole bunch of Genesis and Sega CD stuff, and I probably paid for the lot what I would pay now for this one game. Obviously, this was like the biggest score from that lot even then. It's because it's a great game. Obviously, one of the best sci-fi action movies ever made. Personally, one of my favorite films of all time, the OG Terminator. Being based off a great movie, luckily they did a bang up job with this. I should also mention that this is different from other versions of the Terminator. This is a console exclusive. There are other versions of the Terminator on different platforms, but those games are mechanically and functionally different. This is an exclusive version, if you were not aware, and it's probably the best Terminator game of this generation. I hesitate to say ever. I'm kind of close to saying it because it is fantastic, but I haven't played some of the newer ones like Resistance. There are some other games like Terminator 3 Redemption on Xbox, which I think is a bit of a underrated gem. But yeah, this game's also phenomenal. It's a run and gun with some incredible 2D sprite work, plays fantastically. The music is excellent. It is pretty challenging and difficult. There are limited lives and continues, and some of the later levels get pretty nasty in terms of like death pits and beginner traps and things of that nature, especially like the factory sequence toward the end of the game, which if you've watched the movie, not much of a spoiler, but yeah, there's a factory sequence, there's death pits, there's lava. It throws a lot at you, but it's, I would say at no point is it like unfair. It's a very fair, tough challenge. I'm glad to say I've finished this game, especially because it sat in my collection for a while. I knew it was expensive and I hadn't finished it, which was kind of eating me up a bit, but I can now say I've finished it. I can wholeheartedly recommend this game. Can I recommend it for the price? That's a little harder to say. $180 is a lot for one game. I don't personally think I'd pay that much for any game, but to each their own. I would definitely say try it however you can, though. It is one of the best games that I've personally played of this generation. All right, so that does it for the main list, but if you'll indulge me a little bit longer, I do have some honorable mentions to show as well. Like I said earlier, I do like to collect a lot of obscure and more rare titles. Naturally, with that territory, when there is less listings on eBay, less solds to go off of, price charting really doesn't have have much data to work with. So these were items that maybe could have made it onto the main list, but I didn't have enough data to properly say like for sure this is what they're worth, that deserves to be, you know, X number on the list. So I've got a few here that I just want to show quickly that I figured would be kind of fun as a little addition. The first one we got here is Guardian War on the 3DO. This is yet another sealed 3DO game I got. This one is factory sealed. This one I think price starting had around $89. I saw a copy that on eBay sold go for less than 35, so I feel like the price was just like a little too all over the place to really fairly put this in a proper spot. But yeah, it seems to be, if we can trust price charting, closer to 90, but apparently you can get some deals on sealed copies of Guardian War on the 3DO. This is a pretty cool 3D, as it says, 3D simulation RPG. Very unique turn-based RPG, lots of digitized assets. It's got an interesting art style to say the least. Also banger of a soundtrack, fantastic soundtrack. So Guardian War on the 3DO. Next honorable mention I'd like to briefly discuss is Zigzag Ball on the import PS1. I got another import here. This is another one that is pretty darn rare from what I can tell. I picked this one up on Surigaya and it's no longer on there. eBay only has 3 listings and this didn't even show up on price charting. And of the 3 listings that were currently on eBay, the cheapest one was like 97 bucks shipped. I certainly didn't pay anywhere near that. Again, this is another one of those cases, very rare game. Nobody really knows about it. Doesn't sell very often at all. So hard to pinpoint a price, but yeah, if I had to, I'd say, yeah, maybe close to $100. Pretty crazy on this one. This next one is another one that is very hard to place, but it's a Sega game. And if you like your on-rail shooters, you probably are aware of this one, Panzer Dragoon Orta. Now this one I picked up the Japanese Platinum Collection version because this did not get a Platinum Hits release in the US. And as many of you guys know, I do like my Platinum Hits games. I do remember renting this back in the day from Hollywood Video and thinking it was awesome, and revisiting it, it's awesome. It's a great game. You can get US copies for pretty cheap, relatively speaking, and even some Japanese ones for not too bad. But this Platinum Collection version, the reason this one's special is because it is still sealed. It's still got that Xbox sticker seal on it. Now, it doesn't have the outer shrink wrap, but I mean, it still hasn't been opened, so I would consider this new in box. It's really hard to put a figure on this because I could not find any that have sold. There is one on eBay as of the making of this video, and they want $170 for this. A US sealed copy recently went for $130, and price charting has like a regular Japanese copy at like 96. So honestly, it's really anybody's guess how much this is actually worth. I paid nowhere near that. This was one of those cases where I was just on Surigaya. I saw it, they had it listed as used. I bought it and it shows up at the house and it's sealed. OG Xbox did not do super well in Japan, so I guess they might be selling off some like new old stock in some of these cases. Again, it's a crapshoot, but in this case I got really lucky and glad to have it in the collection. We got yet another 3DO game, and yeah, these 3DO games are hard to pin down, and this one I just gave up on because I could not find proper data, and that's Soccer Kid on the 3DO. Now there's a few reasons I couldn't quite get it to a spot where I was like dead set on the price. I estimate this might be worth about 125, but I could not find any eBay solds of copies of this in the long box in the condition that I have it in. This is probably the cleanest long box of this game that I've personally ever seen show up on eBay or any other websites. So yeah, this is a nice near mint copy. There's a couple creases, but I mean, that's like nitpicking at that point. Just very clean copy. So I would say about 125 if I was to use my best judgment, but again, this is another one I just couldn't quite pin down. This is a great game, by the way. Really fun 2D platformer. It's on a whole bunch of different consoles. Game Boy Advance. I think it was on the Amiga. You can find other ways to play it. It was known as Adventures of Kid Cleats on the Super Nintendo in America, by the way. Great game where you got this soccer ball that you can use to your advantage. Use it for platforming, use it for hitting enemies. Really cool concept, and I loved this game so much I actually played through it twice in one night because I got the bad ending and then I was like, you know what, that ain't good enough. I'm getting the good ending. So if that doesn't tell you how much I enjoyed this game, I don't know what would. You know, I'm pretty picky when it comes to my platformers, so definitely would recommend giving Soccer Kid a shot. All right, and lastly here we got probably what many of you will consider a familiar face. We got the game called Spintail here. This guy might look a little familiar because this is what the Japan audience got as Gex 2 Enter the Gecko. They called it Spintail. I don't know why they changed the name. I actually kind of like the name, and I also vastly prefer this cover art. That is the main reason I bought this. At the time, I got this on Surigaya, and I think they wanted about 40 bucks for it. At the time, the US version was going for about 35, and I was like, you know, I'm already importing some stuff. I might as well grab this. I love the cover art. I'll pay $5 extra for what I consider to be the vastly superior cover art here. So pick this up, and from what I can tell now, this game goes for $120+. There are not many on eBay. I think this is quite a rare version of the game. I don't think this game did super well in Japan, so it's pretty uncommon of a version, especially compared to the US one. So again, this was another one I just couldn't quite pin down, but I think it's quite valuable. Personally, love having this version in the collection. All right, guys, and that'll do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and let me know in the comments, what are some of your rarest or most valuable games in your collection? Love to hear what you guys got, as always, and I really do appreciate the support on the YouTube channel. Thank you guys for being so warm and welcoming and kind in the comments. Until next time, guys, take care. See you soon. A lot of times I avoid those kind of games. I'm mostly just curious